and all of a sudden a bunch of nurses came running in. So I looked at my husband, my mom, and my sister Noelle, and they looked scared. So I was like, what the fuck is going on in my head? I said, is he okay? As they were weighing him, and my husband said he weighs 6 pounds, 20 inches long, and then went into the bathroom. And the nurses came over and said, we need to take him to PICU. The umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck twice. His heart rate was low and his oxygen was low. When I saw him, I started crying because he was a grayish pale color. His nails were purple and he was very little. I put my finger into his hand and he curled his little fingers over mine. They took him away at 11 o'clock and the nurses told me to push to get the placenta out and then told me to order food because I needed to eat, especially with how much blood I lost. I actually almost needed a blood transfusion. As I'm waiting for my food, I called PICU and asked Dean. I called PICU and asked how Dean is doing, and they told me I could come see him in a couple hours. My husband came out of the bathroom pale and sweating and said he needs to go outside and get air. After going to the bathroom, eating, taking medicine, and seeing my daughters, we were finally able to go see Dean. The girls were confused on why I didn't have Dean, so we had to explain to them the best age-appropriate way before we went and saw him. As we got close to the PICU, we were deciding who was going to go in with me next after my husband. As soon as we walked in, they asked me my name, husband his name, our son's name, and we had to sign in. Then they had us go over to the washing station and wash our hands to our elbows for a minute, which was hard seeing I was in a wheelchair. When we got to our son, I started getting teary-eyed seeing all the cords on him, the tube, and how small he was. I had to be strong for my boy, so I didn't want to cry. We weren't allowed to hold him yet, but we were able to at least hold his hand. After like an hour, my husband left. When my kids saw him, they didn't know what to think with all the cords, and they kept asking questions. My sister-in-law had to go home to her kids, and my husband, my sister, Michaela, and the girls had to go home and eat, and they would be back later. So Ava was very upset about leaving me and her new baby brother that she was so worried about. So the nurse took a picture of all three of us and printed it out right away and let her take it home with her. Thankfully, the next day they let me hold my baby boy, and that feeling melted my heart. I had to be careful with all the cords, and I tried to breastfeed him, which went well, but he wasn't getting much but colostrum. Everyone else got to hold him a little after I did. My mom stayed at the hospital with me while my husband and Michaela took care of the kids at home. The nurse told me that when I pump, I can just push the button and they will bring what I pump over to the PICU, or I can bring it over myself if I prefer. So off and on throughout the night, I would pump and bring them the milk and said, sorry, it's not much, and they said every drop counts. I'd then go and sit with him for hours. The first night, I only got 2.5 hours of sleep. Every time I went to go bring him milk, I would sit with him for hours. Thankfully, the next night, he was able to sleep in my room. After medications, IVs, being under a heating light for his low body temperature, getting circumcised, and making sure he was able to pee, we were able to go home. We all spent 3 days in the hospital. At last, our baby boy was home.